Hello, and welcome back to my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Later. Liz dropped me off on the corner and sped away. I walked down to our building. My mother and Barbara hadn't gone for that drink after all. Barb had a cold and said she was going home right after work. Mom was on the steps with her phone in her hand. She flew down the steps when she saw me coming and grabbed me in a panicky hug that squeezed the breath out of me. "Where the fuck were you, James?" She only called me that when she was super pissed, which you might have already guessed. "How could you be so thoughtless? I've been calling everybody. I was starting to think you'll be kidnapped. I even thought of calling." She quit hugging and held me at arm's length. I could see she had been crying and was starting to again. And that made me feel really bad, even though none of it had been my fault. "I think only your mother can truly make you feel lower than real shit. What is it, Liz?" And without waiting for an answer, it was. Then, in a low and deadly voice, "That bitch. I had to go with her, Mom," I said. "I really had to." Then I started crying too. We went upstairs. Mom made coffee and gave me a cup. My first. And I've been a fool for the stuff ever since. I told her almost everything. How Liz had been waiting outside school. How she told me lives depended on finding Thumper's last bomb. How we went to the hospital and to Terriel's building. I even told her how awful Terriel looked with half his head blown out of shape on one side. What I didn't tell her was how I turned around to see him standing behind Liz's car, close enough to grab my arm. If that people can grab a thing, I never want to find out one way or the other. And I didn't tell her what he said. But that night when I went to bed, it clanged into my head like a cracked bell. "I'll be seeing you, champ." Mom kept saying okay, and I understand, all the time looking more distressed. But she had to know what was happening on Long Island, and so did I. She turned on the TV and we sat on the couch to watch Louis Dudley on New York 1. He was doing a stand-up on the street with police sawhorses blocking it off. Police appeared to be taking this tip very seriously. He was saying, according to a source in the Suffolk County Police Department. I remember the news helicopter flying over the Frederick Arms and figured it must have had enough time to chop her out to Long Island, so I grabbed the remote from my mother's hand and flipped over to Channel 4. And there, sure enough, was the roof of the King Cullen supermarket. The parking lot was full of police cars. Parked by the main door was a big van that just about had to belong to the bomb squad. I saw two helmet cops with a pair of dogs on harnesses going inside. The chopper was too high to see if the bomb squad were wearing bulletproof vests and flak jackets, as well as helmets. But I am sure they were. Not the dogs though. If Thumper's bomb went off while they were inside, the dogs would be blown to mush. The reporter in the chopper was saying, "We've been told that all customers and store personnel had been safely evacuated. Although it's possible this is just another false alarm. There had been many during Thumper's reign of terror." Yep, he actually said that. Taking these things seriously is always the wisest course. All we know now is that it was the site of Thumper's first bomb, and that no bomb had been found yet. Let's send it back to the studio. The chromo behind the news anchors had a picture of Theriot, maybe his City of Angels ID, because he looked pretty old. He was no movie star, but he looked a hell of a lot better than he had sitting on that bench. This manufactured tip might not have been taken too seriously had it not caused one of the older detectives in the department to recall a case from his childhood, that of George Metesky, dubbed the Mad Bomber by the press. Metesky planted 33 pipe bombs during his own Reign of Terror, which lasted from 1940 till 1956, and the seed was a similar grudge in his case against Consolidated Edison. Some quick researcher in the news department had also made the connection, and Metesky's face came up next on the chromo behind the anchors, but Mom didn't bother looking at the old guy, who I thought looked weirdly like Theriot in his orderly uniform. She had grabbed her phone, then went muttering into her bedroom for a address book, presumably having deleted Liz's number after their argument about the serious weight. A commercial for some pill came on, so I crept to her bedroom door to listen. If I'd waited, I wouldn't have heard jack shit, because that call didn't last long. "It's Tia, Liz. Listen to me and don't say a word. I am going to keep this to myself for reasons that should be obvious to you. But if you even bother my son again, if he even sees you, I will burn your life to the ground. You know I can do it. All it would take is one single push. Stay away from Jamie." I scurried back to the couch and pretended to be absorbed in the next commercial, which turned out to be as useless as tits on a bowl. "You heard that?" Her eyes were burning, telling me not to lie. I nodded. "Good. If you see her again, you run like hell, home, and tell me, do you understand?" I nodded again. "Okay, right? I'm ordering takeout. Do you want pizza or Chinese?" The cops found and defused Thumper's last bomb that Wednesday night around 8 o'clock. Mom and me were watching Person of Interest on TV when the station broke in with a special bulletin. The sniper dogs had made lots of passes without finding anything, and their bomb squad handlers were about to take them out when one of them alerted in the housewares aisles. They'd been in that one several times before, and there was no place on the shelves to hide a bomb. But one of the cops happened to look up and saw a ceiling panel just slightly out of place. That's where the bomb was, between the ceiling and the roof. It was tied to a girder with stretchy orange cord, like the kind bungee jumpers use. Theriot really blew his wad on this one. 16 sticks of dynamite and a dozen blasting caps. It moved far beyond alarm clocks. The bomb was hooked up to a digital timer very much like the one in those movies I've been thinking about. One of the cops took a picture after it was disarmed, and it was in the next day New York Times. It was set to go off at 5 p.m. on Friday, when the store was almost busiest. The next day, we were back at Mom's favorite. One of the bomb squad guys said it would have brought the whole roof down. When asked how many people might have been killed in such a blast, he only shook his head. That Thursday night, as we ate dinner, my mother said, "You did a good thing, Jamie. A fine thing. Liz did too, whatever her reasons might have been." "It makes me think of something Marty said once. She meant Mr. Burkett. Actually, Professor Burkett. What did he say? Sometimes God uses a broken tool. It was from one of the old English writers he used to teach. He always asked me what I'm learning in school. I said, and he always shook his head like he's thinking I'm getting a bad education. Mom laughed. There's a man who's stuffed with education, and he's still totally sharp and in focus. Remember when we had Christmas dinner with him? Sure, turkey sandwiches with cranberry dressing. The best, plus hot chocolate. Yep, that was a good night. It will be a shame when he passes on. Now eat up. There's apple crisps for dessert. Barbara made them. And Jamie? I looked at her. Can we not talk about this anymore? Just kind of put it behind us. I thought she wasn't just talking about Liz or even Terrell. She was also talking about how I could see dead folk. It was what our computer teacher might have called a global request. And it was alright with me. More than alright, actually. Sure. Right then, sitting in our brightly lit kitchen nook and eating pizza. I really thought we could put it behind us. Only I was wrong. I didn't see Liz Dutton for another 2 years and hardly ever thought about her. But I saw Ken Terrell again that very night. As I said at the beginning, this is a horror story. I was almost asleep when two cats started yowling their heads off, and I was fully awake. We were on the 5th floor, and I might not have heard it, and the clatter of a trash can that followed. If my window hadn't been cracked to let in some fresh air, I got up to shut it and froze with my hand on the sash. Terrell was standing across the street in the spreading glow of the street lamp, and I knew right away that the cats hadn't been yowling because they were fighting. They had been yowling because they were scared. The baby in the papoose carrier had seen him. Still had those cats. He scared them on purpose. He knew I would come to the window, just as he knew Liz called me champ. He grinned from his half-destroyed head. I beckoned. He beckoned. I closed the window and thought about going into my mother's room to get in bed with her, only I was too big for that. And there would be questions, so I pulled the sheet instead. I went back to my bed and lay there, looking up into the dark. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. No dead person had ever followed me home like a fucking stray dog. Never mind, I thought. In 3 or 4 days, he'll be gone like all the other ones had been gone. A week at most. It's not like he can hurt you. But could I be sure of that? Lying there in the dark, I realized I didn't. Seeing dead folks didn't mean knowing dead folk. At last I went back to the window and peeked around the sheet. Sure, he'd still be there. Maybe he even beckoned again. One finger pointed and then curling. Come here. Come to me, champ. No one was under the streetlight. He was gone. I went back to bed, but it took me a long time to go to sleep. I saw him again on Friday outside of school. There were quite a few parents waiting for their kids. There always are on Friday, probably because they're going somewhere for the weekend and they didn't see Terrell. But they must have felt him, because he gave the place where he was standing a wide berth. No one was pushing a baby in a carriage, but if someone had been, I knew that baby would be looking at an empty spot on the sidewalk and bawling his head off. I went back inside and looked at some posters outside of the office, wondering what to do. I suppose I have to talk to him, find out what he wanted, and I made up my mind to do it right then. While there were people around, I didn't think he could hurt me, but I didn't know. I used the boys' room first because all at once I really had to pee, but when I was standing at the urinal, I couldn't squeeze out a single drop. So I went out holding my backpack by the strap instead of wearing it. I had never been touched by a dead person, not once. I didn't know if they could touch, but if Terriel tried to touch me or grab me, I intended to hit him with a sack full of books. Only he was gone. A week went by, then two. I relaxed, figured he had to be past his sell-by date. I was in the YMCA junior swim team, and on a Saturday in late May, we had our final practice for an upcoming meet in Brooklyn, which would take place the following weekend. Mom gave me $10 for something to eat afterwards and told me, as she always did, to make sure I locked my locker so no one would steal the money or my watch. Although, why anybody would want to steal a lousy Timex, I had no idea. I asked her if she was coming to the meet. She looked up from the manuscript she was reading and said, "For the fourth time, Jamie, yes, I'm coming to the meet. It's on my calendar." It was only the second time I've asked, or maybe the third, but I didn't tell her that, only kissed her on the cheek and headed down the hall to the elevator. When the doors opened, Terriel was in there, grinning his grin and staring at me with his good eye and the stretched out one. There was a piece of paper pinned to his shirt. The suicide note was on it. The note was always on it, and the blood splattered across it was always fresh. "Your mother has cancer, champ. From the cigarettes. She'll be dead in 6 months." I was frozen in place with my mouth hanging open. The elevator doors rolled shut. I made some kind of sound, a squeak, a moan. I don't know. I leaned back against the wall so I wouldn't fall down. "You have to tell you the truth," I thought. "My mother is going to die." But then my head cleared a little, and a better thought came. I grasped it like a drowning man clutching at a floating piece of wood. But maybe they only have to tell the truth if you ask them questions. Otherwise, maybe they can tell you any kind of fake shit they want. I didn't want to go to swim practice after that, but if I didn't, Coach might call Mom to ask where I've been, and she would want to know where I've been. And what was I going to tell her? That I was afraid that Thumper would be waiting for me on the corner, or in the lobby? Or somehow this was the most horrible in the shower room, unseen by naked boys rinsing off the chlorine. Was I going to tell her she had fucking cancer? So I went, and as you might guess, I swam for shit. Coach told me to get my head on straight, and had to pinch my armpit to keep from bursting into tears, sorry. I had to pinch it really hard. When I got home, Mom was still deep in her manuscript. I hadn't seen her smoking since Liz left, but I knew she sometimes drank when I wasn't there, with her authors and various editors. So I sniffed at her when I kissed her, and I didn't smell anything but a little perfume, or maybe face cream, since it was Saturday, some kind of lady stuff anyway. "Are you coming down with a cold, Jamie? You dried off well after swimming, didn't you?" "Yeah, Mom. You're not smoking anymore, are you?" So that's it. She put aside the manuscript and stretched. "No, I haven't had one since Liz left." "Since you kicked her out," I thought. Have you been to the doctor lately? You get a checkup? She looked at me weird. What is this about? You've got that crease between your brows. Well, I said, you're the only parent I have left. If something happened to you, I couldn't exactly go live with Uncle Harry, could I? She made a funny face at that, then laughed and hugged me. I'm fine, kiddo. I had the old annual checkup 2 months ago. As a matter of fact, passed with flying colors. And she looked okay in the pink. As the saying goes, I hadn't lost any more weight that I could see. I wasn't coughing her brains out. Although cancer didn't just have to be in a person's throat or lungs, I knew that. Well, that's good. I'm glad. That makes 2 of us. Now make your mom a cup of coffee and let me finish this manuscript. Is it a good one? As a matter of fact, it is. Better than Mr. Thomas Roanoke books? Much better. But not as a commercial, Phyllis. Can I have a cup of coffee? She sighed. Half a cup. Now let me read. And with this, I'm gonna stop it here for this part. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.